Internets. This is the Pacific PowerShell user group. We meet the second Wednesday of every given month. And this week, I'm going to talk about social sites with that protocol on PowerShell. You can catch us on Twitch or join us at the meetup. Okay, let's get into it. First, the generic Who Am I slide, which only slightly ever changes. I'm James from Start Automating, pretty prolific programmer. Say that 5 times fast. I was a PowerShell team member between 2006 and 2010. I've been a PowerShell innovator, hopefully until the day I die. I love finding amazing things that the language can do and sharing them with you. It's kind of a life's work. And today we're going to talk about social sites. We're going to do this in 2 parts. One that's going to cover the social media side of things, and then we're going to get into the very cool nitty-gritty of how you build GitHub pages with PowerShell. But first, let's get social. Social media is everywhere, much as we might have complicated feelings about this. It is a key part of the internet. It shapes our lives, whether we like it or not. And it is a savvy or life skill that you need to have. It's not necessarily a life skill that I have perfectly, but it's a life skill that we all need. Nowadays, if you want to build a website, it's got to be social, which just adds to the joy and challenge of trying to build websites in 2025. If only there were an easy protocol to work with. This is a perpetual problem all programmers face. If there's new technology, how the heck do you work with it? Can I work with it consistently? The answer to that classically in social media has been no. You cannot work with it at all consistently, and that is an answer that is rapidly changing due to something called the app protocol. The app protocol is a protocol for social media. It is what Blue Sky is built on. It is very interesting. Why? Well, it's open and logical, so it's easy to kind of understand what it's trying to do. It's fast, it's decentralized, it's not just posts. So it's very, very quick to work with. It doesn't need a particular central point, so it will probably exist on after Blue Sky, if Blue Sky goes anywhere. And it is not limited to just posting an update. In fact, it's not really limited at all. It's anything. When you're posting to Blue Sky, that's just one of a number of things you can do with the app protocol. It is a protocol for objects at its core. It's addressing objects. The at is at of who and essentially what. So it's a protocol for objects, and we can do amazing things with that, especially us PowerShell nerds. You'll start to see where I'm going, hopefully, in a second. I tend to think of it as an object pipeline of the world. Whenever you create a post, like, or follow, it is an object. These should be defined in lexicons. They can be used openly. That is to say, they can be anything, but often are consistent enough to use. Whenever you make a post or any other object, it goes up, up, and away into the jet stream. So let's ride that jet stream. The jet stream is the way the app protocol servers broadcast. This is key to the protocol and will probably always be public and free. Basically, when you make a post, for it to be decentralized, it goes out onto this series of servers, they call them PDSs, that replicate that message. All the messages they're getting posted go up into the central jet stream and go out to everybody. That's its architecture. That's the way it's always probably going to work. It's a WebSocket you can subscribe to. That's part of why App Protocol is so fast. And once you subscribe to it, you get an endless pipeline of objects. Lucky for us PowerShell people, we really like objects. Also lucky for us, we like making modules. For instance, I made one for WebSockets. So let's WebSocket to me.
Hey, James,
Yeah,
I got a question. The at protocol servers, is that something that's specific to Blue Sky, or is that a open standard?
that is the standard Blue Sky is built upon and is a steward of, but
Ah,
they are trying to make it W3C standard.
okay, awesome. Thanks.
So the hope is that this is basically a new web standard for how social media could be interchanged, period. And that is incredibly interesting because it opens up a lot of doors to how we view and process data and the sorts of stuff we can build. I mean, just to kind of riff on it for a little bit, imagine if, using a very commercial example, imagine if every grocery store deal was sent out. It'd be really easy to clip coupons, right? Getting more social, imagine if you wanted to organize people. It would be a easy way to help identify people to organize with. And understanding how to work with this data is important. It would also be a good way to aggregate the data. Uh, so if you wanted to have something that kept up to date whenever you posted, for instance, then you'd want to be able to work with that protocol because it's easier than working 15 different protocols to store your data. And it's much easier to jump onto communities that already exist than to try to build your own from scratch. Is that all making
Cool.
sense?
Yeah. Hey, sorry to
Oh,
to
no.
interject. I hope I didn't throw a wrench into your WebSocket.
I really need to add sound effects to this. Done.
But yeah, thanks. I wasn't familiar with the app protocol.
No, it's okay. That's part of the first half of this is just setting the stage for what ad protocol is if you're not already up to speed and getting a sense of how we can work with it in PowerShell and how you can integrate it into a social media site. First things first, we have to understand what that is. It's the first couple slides, and then we have to understand how we work with it, and that's kind of where we're at now. All you need to kind of get is, again, it's an object pipeline of the world. We can subscribe to it by using a WebSocket. There's a PowerShell module for WebSockets, and that brings us back to here, the PowerShell module for WebSockets. I've started being very uncreative with my naming in some cases and just calling it the thing. So I created a WebSocket module. You can find it at github.com/PowerShellWeb/WebSocket. We're going to come back to it later. You can also import or install module WebSocket and just use it. And it's handy. It lets you subscribe to a WebSocket, which, makes them a lot easier to work with. It also lets you create a WebSocket, but we're going to put a pin in that. We're not going to bother talking about it this particular time. Uh, it would be interesting to look at for other dynamic sites, but today we're going to be talking about building static sites off of this. We can use this to really easily ride the jet stream, or as another way to think of it, drink from the fire hose of data. Significant bonus points here. Uh, it has a GitHub action. GitHub workflows are free. GitHub pages are free. So it does not cost you or anybody anything to start trying to build websites this way. It's very easy and very open and fairly well documented and fairly approachable. Like, I'm definitely spending more time talking about it than we will take going through and taking a few sips of the fire hose. So let's do that. Demo time. Time to open up a new VS Code window and drag it over. So we're going to start with the WebSocket module because it uses the Jetstream as its primary examples. Yep. Can everybody see the screen?
Yeah, it's looking good.
Okay. just where did my terminal go? That's the great question. All right, it's going to complain because I don't already have it imported. Let's go ahead and import this module. Here is the jet stream. We're getting it from US West Blue Sky Network. We're subscribing. We want collections. That's the types of objects. In this case, we only want posts. Does everybody understand this part of the command line? Does this look obvious enough to everybody?
So it looks somewhat obvious, but you're using the WSS protocol?
Yes, that is. Just like there is HTTP and HTTPS, there is WebSocket and WebSocket Secure. So this is just another part of the internet. The difference between a WebSocket and a normal web request is that a WebSocket stays open, so you can very quickly send data and receive data over a WebSocket much more effectively and quickly than you could, well, via an HTTP request. So this is what's used often for push notifications as well. That's effectively what this is doing, is it's push notifying everybody in the world that's subscribing whenever posts arrive. So let's take a quick drink of the fire hose. We're going to watch this with a timeout for 30 seconds. In fact, I'm going to do my exact old example and T object 30 seconds of the fire hose. These are posts being made all over the world. We're not going to be able to predict what are in any of them, but we can very easily data mine them, and you should be getting a sense for how much is posted, unless I failed to put it in my timeout, in which case, hold up, did I say timeout 30 seconds? I'm just being impatient. Let's go 15. I'm either being impatient or I'm dealing with bugs. One or the other. I certainly hope it's not the dealing with bugs. There we are, 15 seconds the fire hose. So in 15 seconds the fire hose, we had 870 posts. These are commits in their parlance to a repository. What are you committing? You're committing into this collection, and it has the record key of this. And who is committing? That's the DID, the decentralized identifier. Now, your user profile has a DID. That is how you represent yourself as a Blue Sky user. So it's very easy to track just stuff from you if you wanted to as well, or to filter out stuff related to you from all of this. But in these 30 seconds from the fire hose, we've got a bunch of commits. They generally have a record of the commit. You also generally have it created at, and here we have a post about GTA 6. And Toes for sure, and Joss on Jingle Physics, and I'm not sure I want to keep scrolling up.
If you're tracking your post based on the DID, are you seeing what you did there?
I think they did see what they did. I'm
Okay.
100% sure that internet geeks name protocols at least partially in joke form.
Oh, heck yeah, I would.
I mean, it's called the app protocol, and they did do it like that. So don't do me like that, you know, that they do it like that, not me. Don't blame the joke.
I
Just
love
enjoy
it.
it. So let's do something a little bit more fun. Let's go ahead and watch for some hashtags. Again, I have no control over what's being posted. We're going to go for a max of 15 seconds again. And I'm going to feel very stupid. Sorry. Timeout of 15 seconds. Max is the number.
What could possibly go wrong with getting a raw feed from the internet?
It's the internet. It's not a problem.
Right. I mean, it's not like we're doing Reddit here or anything.
I'm actually more like, why isn't it already posting? These things run as PowerShell jobs, but yeah, I find it very unlikely that nobody posted a hashtag in the last 15 seconds. We're going to go to another one that is hashtags and emoji, and we're going to cap this out at, again, let's do 30 seconds of this. We're proving at least a couple of laws of the internet right now.
I'm thoroughly surprised there are no eggplants.
I just saw one, like right when you said the word eggplant. There was an eggplant.
Oh,
I'm sure it's burning by faster live than we're seeing on the shared screen.
Probably a little bit, but not too much.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
also, gotta love the last emoji there.
yeah.
You know, so object pipeline, a human thought, object pipeline of the world. Here is data coming from everywhere that we can use. This is really, really powerful, right? It implicitly makes sense just how valuable this sort of insight could be. And because it's easy to work with in PowerShell, we can do really easy things with it, like use it as the backbone of static site generation. And that's where I'm going to go take us into my floundering attempts at building a personal site for a second. Just for a second, because we're only going to go talk about how it's getting the data from Blue Sky. So I've got my WebSocket module up here. I've got a Jetstream URL that's a little bit randomized, so I'm picking a server so they don't hate me as much. I've got a little hash table that says, hey, my well-known ID here maps to this. Then I set, I want anything from the half day from now, and I wait for 15 minutes after I started connecting. And I want to store images as PNG. Everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
Cool. Should have done a better job of documenting this script. But I'm adding the well-known DIDs to any DIDs that I want to collect. I'm creating a URL by taking their base and adding the query and giving it a bunch of different collections that I might want and giving it a bunch of different DIDs. I'm actually not focusing down the collections, which gives me everything. In fact, let's do a bit of that for a second, just
Hey,
so you have
James,
a sense. Yep.
before I was going to catch you before you rolled off the code, because someone who may not be as familiar when they're looking at what you're doing there, it's a really cool and clever way to concatenate your strings together. And I wanted
Which
to point it
one?
out.
Oh, this. Yeah.
Yeah, so where you're doing the parenthetical arrays, and then you do dash join, and you're joining it with another basically string operator,
Yeah.
or I'm sorry, a string object. And so all the JetString URL, and then the question mark, and then the collection code is all joined in between by an ampersand. And then at the end, you're mashing it all together with no spaces.
Yep. That is exactly right. And this is indeed a very useful trick. And as I pointed out, Mike Robinson brought this up on Blue Sky a few days ago. Um, it it can have a conditional too. I mean, we've got a loop in here, but you can have, if x equal or is greater than y, you know, z equals 1, 2, 3. So, makes sense. Really easy. Nice way to construct collections. And a very nice way to kind of put URLs together. We're going to get to other tricks of the trade in a second. I was going to show you basically 1,000 general messages where we're not actually scoping it down. So let's go grab fire hose data. In this case, we're not doing watch, so it's got a background job running. And it's done, got us 1,000 messages before we even really blinked. And we can go to the commit record type, I think. Yep. And good old PowerShell, let's group object, no element, sort object count, descending. So of
Hold
our
up.
1,000-bit,
What does no element do? Never use that one.
sure. No element says I don't care what elements it was.
No.
Just group them. In fact, a probably better way to do this with elements, we can do, let me fix my code a little bit. We can group object expression. Same deal. So of this little sliver of the internet, we had 672 likes, 112 reposts, 100 people follows, 94 posts, 26 we're not quite sure, 7 graph blocks, 5 people updated their profile. I don't know what Threadgate is off the top of my head. 2 people updated lists, somebody made a feed, and somebody made a post to a feed. Object pipeline of human thought / of the world. Is this making more sense to everybody now?
Yeah.
So, like, if I'm trying to tell you if Blink 182 had a sudden surge in popularity, surprising as that would be, I can grab that sort of information out of the jet stream as it's coming by. And if I'm dealing with this in PowerShell and I'm not keeping the objects around, we're not even talking about that much memory consumption or complexity. To put it in really simple terms, it's just for each object. So, yeah. That's cool, right?
Yes, that is cool.
So, knowing that it's just for each object, and I'm going to get a bunch of stuff back. I'm creating my thing in the Jetstream. I want to be able to get what the @URI is for a thing. This is their URI format, which is, as put here, the did or who did it, the record type or what it is, and the record key. That represents any of the things that you're posting to on Blue Sky. Okay? Saving the image, which will go, say, grab the embedded images from that, grab the reference, and take a 2-parameter, and just go ahead and invoke web request and put the image into a file. So I can download images. Downloading posts, the only thing that kind of is annoying is that I've got to basically strip out the colon, because dids are generally going to use colons. Colons are not happy, file system paths on Windows. So I'm just doing this for universal acceptance here. And then I'm stripping the @URI portion out. And then I'm replacing the end of it with the JSON file. So what were you? I don't care. Give me this information in @URI. I'm going to go turn you into JSON now. Then I'm going to check, do I have a file here? And if I do not, I'm going to go take whatever I had and put you in that file. And since it's an object pipeline of human thought expressed in JSON, that's it. I'm converting to JSON. If we had export JSON, this would be one perfect line. And
so again, before you move off of that one, for people that are possibly watching this video on the recording, a reminder that replace is using a regex. So when he does the $2 replace $sign, the $sign signifying end of line. And so that's how he's tagging on JSON at the end. But all of the replaces are doing that. And that's why the second replace is caret at underscore, caret signifying the beginning of line.
Yep, close enough. So I'd actually have it set to return here as my temporary code because I was changing some things. But overall, beyond that, I go create the jet stream and I receive a batch and I save the batch. And I say, hey, I found new files. And whenever I hit the timeout, I let them know if, God forbid, my timeout wasn't working as expected. And then I receive the last batch in case I've got anything left, and I do the same thing, and I output all the things, and I stop the job. So 150 lines. A little bit less than. And I built a website where I built the thing that collects data for a website that will just go and grab every single post I make to Blue Sky of any type. So I'm going to go to the Start Automating Mr. PowerShell repo here for a second. We're coming back to this later. But on the pure social side of things, is this making sense? Here's all the follows that I've done in the past bit. I guess haven't followed anybody new in a few weeks. Haven't done too much reposting. I did backfill all of my posts, so this one has quite a few. In fact, enough that GitHub's like, no, I'm not going to show you all of them. But here is the post. In fact, here is my literal first post. I am kind of curious if they're in chronological order.
Interesting.
I don't think they are. 2023 8/8. They might be. That'd be interesting. Yeah.
So you're storing your posts as JSON.
They're storing the posts as JSON. I'm just taking them and storing them in GitHub as well.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was getting at. It's like you're putting these in GitHub. Fascinating. Okay.
Now, the point that I've done this, I literally have everything I've ever posted. This is a post from a couple of years ago at this point, almost. And Blue Sky is barely this old. So, yeah.
I'm surprised that doesn't say first post on it.
I try to have some personality with these things. Mostly I just talk about PowerShell. But,
Come on.
Yeah, I can show you how we can kind of go back in time briefly too, because this is a little bit fun, although I don't think I've checked this particular example in. And it is definitely not well named in terms of my directory structure right now. It's complete lie of a name. But one of the things you can do in @protocol publicly is you can list records. So if I know who did it, I can ask for all records of a given collection type and pass along a cursor and say I want up to X number of them back. And I invoke REST method and I get that. So let's do repost and make this, a bit more of a lie. And let's go ahead and run my not actually likes script. And there you go. That's every repost I've ever done.
So if you pull that up in
And
GitHub,
it doesn't even care. I'm hitting Blue Sky to get these posts twice. So I'm also not logged in.
If you go look at that in your repo, that's a repost post in your repo.
I mean, that is both accurate and dad joke category, so I guess I'll allow it.
I love it. Oh, that's really cool.
But I'm not actually checking in every one of them in the past because I don't need to. I could. And I have done it for posts. I haven't done it for everything. So, are we getting what Blue Sky can do for us? And do we like our few sips of the fire hose? Is this y'all having fun?
Yeah.
Cool. And we already showed a quick demo.
I
Let's
feel
go
like
to the
see
next
more.
part of things.
I'd like to see more.
Down by
Kinda
the
like
bleachers.
What's that little shop of horrors? Feed me, Seymour.
Yes.
So I feel like what you built pretty much is like when everyone was like leaving Twitter, right? They wanted to back up all their data. Like you've essentially done that, right? That's what you've written, a script to go grab all your posts. You're putting them in GitHub, but like you could migrate them to some other social media website potentially if something else comes after Blue Sky or whatever, right? Like now you have all the data.
Yes.
So
Now
that's
you have all
really
the
cool.
data. That is one part of it, but I want to stress these other important parts. I am not logged in, and it doesn't have to be just my data. In fact,
Your
I
data.
am
Yeah.
deciding to selectively only ask for my data with this site. And actually, let's take you to another example of this in action. So, I haven't built the website portion of this out yet, but I did this experiment before PowerShell Summit. This one's only 126 lines. And I just said, I'm going to grab all the posts from PowerShell Summit, everybody's posts. Basically the same script. I think this one came first. Okay. I have no idea who this is, but they only posted about Summit once. And we're going to find out what this Summit photo is. That's one of the 3D printed things. This is about someone's journey. And more to the point, even though PowerShell Summit is over, at PowerShell Summit's running. In fact, I mean, joy of GitHub workflows, it's run 3,285 times. I have yet to get an angry email from GitHub.
I think they'll just send you a bill before an angry email.
I don't think they will send me a bill at all because it is an open source repository,
Right. Yeah.
which has unlimited storage. And because the amount of bandwidth to go drink from the fire hose has got to be just nothing in compared to the amount of bandwidth to, say, download packages as part of a build. In fact, actually, we can kind of prove this out if I just go open one more repo. And that is, well, let's just do it this way, at PowerShell Summit, because it's all in one folder, recurse filter star.json, measure object. Actually, let's just go ask for all the files because I want to know. Measure object property length, sum. So every photo included, all this is 70 megabytes. Again, no email from them. If we're just looking at JSON files, 282 kilobytes. Right? Yeah. Not 275. So, yeah, it's an astoundingly small amount of space, at least for limited enough topics. Now, I'm sure if I was doing everything from PowerShell, it would be more. And there was a certain protest a couple of months ago as well that I ran it as an experiment, and that ended up taking like including photos, probably like a couple hundred megabytes. So your results may vary because you've got 33 million people that can potentially be posting information. But I don't think I would see an angry email from GitHub because they're hosting terabytes of data every day. So, got a long way to go before that angry email or bill. And even when that bill arrives, last time I checked, long-term storage costs were really cheap.
Got a
So,
question about your scheduler. So is the schedule where you're looking for the PowerShell Summit in GitHub, is that where is that scheduled? Is
that is
actually
in
the
GitHub,
question.
yeah. And
Okay, so you have a pipeline that's doing that every 5 minutes, 1 minute? How's that set up?
that is a good question. Let's go back to this one and kind of talk through some kind of core principles. So, first thing that's not necessarily obvious is that we can kind of ask what the jet stream was like up to 2 days ago. So we can go back in time. Right? So in order to make sure I don't have any gaps, I'm saying give me everything in the past half day. In order to ensure that I run for a finite period of time and check in the file sometime, I'm just saying I'm going to time out after 15 minutes. Okay? Now, in this particular case, because the did is always me and the record key is a key, right? I can just store the data as is multiple times without a problem. It's the same data, right? So I don't have to really worry about collisions. Maybe a little bit in terms of what might be a conflict in merging, but if that happens, I'll pick it up the next time, basically. So I'll generally set a time frame back in the past that is stable enough to work with consistently. And then I'll set a timeout like this. And then we will have a GitHub workflow to synchronize with cron schedule. In this cron schedule, I'm almost always using the exact timeout because I don't really want there to be a gap of collection of information. But you could be lazier without a problem. So don't consider this perfectly prescriptive advice. Got it?
That's very interesting.
And all it is doing literally is just check it out, run the WebSocket module, which in turn is going to run all the WebSocket PS1 files. And there we are. That runs for 15 minutes. It watches my stuff. It checks in a bunch of stuff. All done. You can also do this. Steal this code.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm just wondering, Blue Sky obviously lets you go back in time, like to the very beginning or whatever, but that's not inherently a feature of like the AT protocol, right? Like there could be other things built on the AT protocol that don't allow you to do that, or that say you have to authenticate to go get the data. Just want to make sure, is that correct, would you say?
Sort of. There's operations you can have in Blue Sky that have to be authenticated, but listing past records of a user is not one of them.
Yeah, because you can go publicly search on the website, right? And yeah.
That's kind of the opinion. Yeah, it's public is public. If it is a private record, it should require authentication and should not be out on the jet stream. If it is a public record, it goes out to the jet stream for the entire world to see. And part of their philosophy seems to be aligned to basically that sunlight disinfectant sort of quality, where it's better to know if somebody is basically group blocking people than it is to have that be a completely private piece of information, right? So the default setting for a lot of Blue Sky stuff is that data should be public. And I kind of tend to agree with it because I don't see a lot of benefits to keeping all data or most data private. I do feel like there are certain types of data that should be less commonly made public, but also it's easier to spot that if everybody's publicly posting them. Essentially, if I dox you on Discord, nobody knows. But if I try to dox you on Blue Sky, there's the record of you doing that 10 servers have. Good luck denying it. So it helps enforce the collective terms of service. Does that make some degree of sense?
Yep,
It does.
for sure.
Cool.
So,
I don't
James,
see this going anywhere again. I feel like this is going to stay. And yes,
Josh Hendricks pointed out in the chat that the GitHub will disable your workflow after some number of months of inactivity in the repo. So if you do build this, you need to either have a watcher to make sure that your stuff is staying alive, or you need to have some way to keep your repo refreshed.
how do I put this? That is good to know. I don't know what exact time frame that is, but I would expect it to be fairly long. And we can check by next PowerShell Summit if they have shut that off. And if it is over a year, then I would suggest that any dead man switch should automatically trip after a year. Does that make sense?
Sure, it does.
Yeah. But yeah.
Josh also followed up. Apparently, his microphone's not working, but he says if the workflow actually modifies the content of the repo, it'll probably keep resetting the counter. So by the very fact that you're pushing stuff back into it, it's resetting your timer.
Yes, and after I'm in the ground, somebody can tell me if these websites go offline.
I plan on not doing this for that long. Come on, man.
Well, one of the younger people on the call then. Anyway, so do we kind of get how I'm basically populating my social history, or for that matter, anybody's social history, into GitHub for free in GitHub Actions? Do we see what the jet stream is? Do we understand what it's doing and how we can kind of tap into it? Because believe it or not, this was the complicated, hard part, and the rest of it is just really easy fun that is very simple to get. Which finally brings me back to the PowerPoint. Almost done, I swear. Static sites really are easy. Like, kind of stupidly easy. You just generate files. I am actually kind of annoyed at myself and somewhat at all of us for not figuring out this sooner, because it makes web development in PowerShell, especially static site development, much easier to approach and to just do as a matter of convention. And to that degree, I'm very fond of this naming convention. Tell me if this makes sense. Name a file .extension.ps1 or index.html.ps1. Does everybody get what that is going to produce? Is that a clear naming convention for a file? Using it in examples, I can run index ps1 and redirect to index. And there I can create my file and test it. Or I could use some central layout script, pipe it into a layout, and then put it into the HTML. Is this making sense?
I was with you until you piped it into layout.
Any step you want here, any PowerShell command you want, any layout script you want to use. So, yeah.
So like you could put header and footer information on the layout. And so the index.html content comes across, and then layout adds your header and footer content.
Yep.
Okay.
Is this as obvious to everybody else here as it is to me? Because this, for me, is like, again, both revelatory and why didn't I realize this sooner?
Yeah, this totally makes sense to me. I don't know why I didn't think of it earlier. Just last week, I was using like GitHub Copilot to convert a PHP website to just like make it a static website because like I wrote it 10 years ago or 15, no longer than that, 15 years ago when I only really knew PHP.
Yeah.
But like it doesn't actually have any back-end server processing. I was just using it to generate the front-end HTML. But yeah, using PowerShell to do that instead is way better because then I can host it on GitHub Pages instead of having to pay for like an Azure App Service to host PHP on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
if you're building it on top of Blue Sky and that protocol, you can do this all in a GitHub workflow, and you actually don't need a backend
yeah.
at all. Like
So
basically,
very
App
similar to
Protocol
like,
is your backend.
right? Very cool. So yeah, it's like Jekyll or Hugo, but with PowerShell instead. Yeah,
Jekyll or Hugo with PowerShell or Stead, but purely PowerShell. In
yeah,
fact, like I'm going to be putting this into something like a module, but part of the point is you don't need to, at least for the day. You can literally just stick it in a workflow and call it a day. Or, if we're kind of taking from Nike's book, just build it. And I do mean just build it. So you GitHub workflows run PowerShell core. That's nice and fast. You just go ahead and say shell posh, PWSH, in any script step. So to build a static site with pure PowerShell, you just called build.ps1. And I don't care how your build PS1 works. You can build it any way you'd like. Just you're free to do what you want to do. Any build PS1 can build your site. For that matter, it doesn't need to be called build PS1. It doesn't even need to be a self-contained script. You can call whatever you want in a workflow. A lot of us know this sort of intimately because we do DevOps for a living, right? So, of course, we can call PowerShell, and of course, we can just build it. And that means it's actually really easy to experiment. So, let's talk about my website. My website is a work in progress, or more properly, a living demo. We're going to go to mrpowershell.com in a second. You're welcome to go now. It has some aesthetic problems, but definitely also some cool toys that we're going to go through. You can also see the repository at github.com/startautomating Mr. PowerShell. And it is an experiment in social sites built with that protocol and PowerShell. Hey, that's the name of this talk. It's also an experiment in how easy I can make it, and essentially how I can make something like Jekyll or Hugo, but without having a real proper module requirement. So let's dive into some code and see how it works. I'm going to start with my favorite, at least current, social media integration. I have a memes page. And it actually does take a sec to load because I am literally loading every single meme that I have ever posted to Blue Sky. With its content. And for bonus points, the alt text, which often contains great little jokes. So, yeah. Now, if we wanted to get a little bit crazy, because this is a given site, because this is a PowerShell static site and we don't delete the original file, I can actually go open up my index PS1 here.
What the heck?
Yep. At least it opened up in the right window. Yes, that is the one in downloads. Though this will not work as expected because it's expecting files in PS script root. So actually, let's go check out its real source here. There we go. And there we go. And of course, I made slight modifications to it. Oh, I've taken some white space out. That's totally worth not checking in. But yeah, this is a pretty lazy approach to the thing. I'm taking a did parameter here, so I can just grab the directory of my choosing. I'm giving this page a title, and that'll flow up into the layout. I'm going and grabbing all the post files. I'm walking over all the post files and turning them into JSON and then sorting them by their created date. I could make this faster. I probably will make this faster. But the point of it is it works and it's easy. And as far as faster or not goes, let's see how many experiments we've run at this point. Let's go to our GitHub icon here. Let's go to our actions. Let's go to deploy website here. 1,455 or 35 times. And most of them under a minute. So I'm not really feeling like I'm doing terribly on perf, especially considering I'm generating some insane stuff as I go. You might also notice that there's not a checked in index.html, because there doesn't need to be. Because it's generating this static site essentially on the fly as it does its deployment. But anyway, I'm going over all my posts. And if the post is from Tenor, which is the service Blue Sky uses for GIFs, then more white space changes. Then I can go ahead and create my post for the GIF. And another thing to note here, one of the reasons especially that we pipe our output from these things is that it's really easy to just output a bunch of different strings. So here I'm outputting a chunk of CSS. Here I'm outputting the start of the grid. And then every time I have a new image, I'm going and creating other HTML chunks. And I even have the web HTTP utility class to help me out. Static sites are really easy. You just write HTML. You write scripts that output HTML, or you write scripts that output CSS, or you write scripts that output JavaScript. And you check them in. And you call it good.
So James, what do you do? Like, I really like this idea, but like the one downside I see just while looking at this is like, because it's in a PS1 file, while you're writing your HTML in a string or your JavaScript or your CSS, you're not going to get like auto completion and like IntelliSense and that type of stuff. How, or like, do you have a flow? How do you work around that, or do you just
Okay,
really do
so
freehand it all?
well, first, let's countervail the narrative. Copilot is actually smart enough to figure that out. So it will. Oh, you're basically doing some metaprogramming in PowerShell, and it'll help you generate the HTML inside of PowerShell, no problem. In fact, like sometimes it's a little bit annoying, but that's easy enough to, as the kids call it nowadays, vibe code your way through.
Ooh.
Yeah, that was about the reaction I was expecting / deserved. But it's also very easy to just output it to a file and check. So if I don't want
Right.
anything else, I can just do this.
Yeah, and then you could even go make modifications there, and then things like if you have extra VS Code extensions or whatever that work with HTML files, then you would get your IntelliSense and things like that. So okay.
Yeah, and theoretically, some of those extensions could be modified to work with a sort of a paradigm or framework. The major thing I want to keep underlining is this is a technique. This isn't tooling. You can do this however the hell you want. I'm just finding it a pretty convenient way to approach it.
Yeah,
And
it's super cool, I think. It's
there's my
really
memes
neat.
page. Done locally. And if I wanted to do it with layout, then again, I just pipe it to a layout script. The way I've been writing it is I put layout in any directory, but I'll always put one at root. So should have picked a shorter example to run because there are a lot of memes. Well, just as I'm complaining, it has no problem doing that again. Yes, squirrel indeed. So again, it's very, very easy to kind of just approach building this out. Um, when I also say just build it, let's take you to the actual build that I've got at this point. It's a little bit, it's growing, I guess is one good way to put it. I'm trying to get something vaguely Jekyll-like. And so I've started basically saying, hey, I'm going to have some community, functions. And so I'm going dot sourcing those first. And I'm creating a site object. And then I'm creating a build file alias, because that's what I'm going to call the thing for the moment that builds each individual file. And I'm taking the GitHub event, and this is where we start to get to just crazy pants territory. I can go ahead and look at anything that I've published to the website and get the GitHub event that published it. So this one was published on a schedule. Kind of as it should be, because I haven't made change to it during this meeting. And as you can see from the schedule, it is every 42 minutes of every hour, on the 42nd minute of every hour. So, about due. I'm checking to see if there's a CNAME file. I'm going and setting whatever's in there, and then I'm setting a root URL if there is one. I'm looking for config, and if there is that, I'll go get that. And if there's a config PSD1, I'll go take that data and throw it into the site too. And if there's a config YAML, then here's a little quick filter that I wrote to go grab the YAML module and convert from YAML and call it a day. So, yeah. This covers basically having a similar config to Jekyll or Hugo. And this is a much more open-ended potential of config, where I'm taking any config PS1. Say what?
Sorry, I think that might have been background noise.
Okay. So then we got our last build time, which is going to be, now, and another silly timer while we go build all the files. And then we get crazy again. We want to figure out how long it was between, or for the build and between the builds. So we create a new last build information that has when we built and what message or schedule or if we run on demand. Then we go to our old website and we get our last build. So again, to underline the craziness of the point here, I am making files that don't actually exist in the repository that are going out to the website on the fly every deploy. And those files are going back to the current version of the website and maintaining a chain of custody of data. Mind's blown, right? So I can basically have a database without having a database, just syncing the deltas between data currently exposed on my website. Is this making sense? No is a fine answer. Yes would be better. If I have to call Bueller, I'm going to feel cliched. Everybody's still here with me?
Still here, brain melting.
Yeah, I get that a lot. Okay. So the last brain melty point of the build is I'm just going to go ahead and make a zip file of the build, of the current existing build. I maybe should call it something not archive, but whatever. And I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And, oh, this is the 6th time I've done that. I know, because it keeps giving me downloads. And here is the generated source. So this would be a file that's checked in. That's a file that's checked in. That's generated on the fly. Here's the layout script that we were talking about earlier. Let's go take a look at that because it's getting a little cool and fancy. I can go ahead and set a palette name because I got this site I've already built that has lots of color palettes. I can go ahead and set up a Google font and a code font. I can take any args and input, which is basically anything you'd pass to the script. So when you're piping into layout, I'm just going to grab all your layout. There we go. If there wasn't a page metadata, I'm going to create that. And if you have a title, I'm going to set up the open graph for that. And if you have a description, I'm going to set up the open graph for that. You got a preview image, I'm going to set up the open graph for that. And then it's just off to the races building some HTML. And it's actually a very easy update the code, let it deploy, see how it works if you want sort of cycle. But, here is my initial CSS style. Here is my head tag. If I've got some analytics tag for the site, I put that in there. Go ahead and put in the title for the page. Give myself a viewport, load the palette, get one font, get the other font. Go ahead and get highlight.js, get HTMX. Basically just throw in chunks of HTML that work. CodePen and the like, it's very easy to find these 5 lines of HTML that do cool thing, and you can just copy and paste them in and put a variable in there and call it a day. It's beautiful. So I'm going to take my open graph data and I'm going to create a bunch of meta tags. I'm going to put my import map if I've got one. I'm going to put in my style. I'm going to load up any other languages I need for highlight.js. And I'm going to throw in my args and input, and I'm going to tell highlight.js to highlight all my code. And that's my layout. And this is my website. So, yeah, again, it's getting pretty cool. I am definitely not done with this yet. It's a fun work in progress and an experiment in what I can do. Oh, yeah, there's this one. So, just in the you can do it, but it's not going to give you what you want sort of case. You can do, HTTPS mrpowershell.com and hello world.clyxml. And I can get this, but let's do management, automation, PS serializer, deserialize, hello. Okay. We're going to do one more try on that. Hello.outerXML. So I cannot use this to get a script block and just get a string. But I can totally have ClyXML inside of a web page and load it up relatively easily. So if I wanted to throw more rich stuff in there, I can. And in fact, I've got a ongoing test directory that has a bunch of fun stuff. This is one thing that I've figured out I can do. I can basically output whole data tables of information. So for a limited time only, because I'll probably be taking this one down, I can go to the GitHub runnerapps.xml and hold on, drag it over. Here is every application available to you in a GitHub action. I can use any one of these to help me build the site because it's just PowerShell. It's just calling commands. And I want to actually pause right here for a second or continue to scroll and monologue for a bit. When you're dealing with something like Hugo or Jekyll, you are dealing with a very limited syntax, almost purposefully limited syntax to create HTML. So sure, there's a lot more tooling out there that already for these things and templates, fine. But the languages that they're built on, well, Go is very capable. Ruby is not always, and they don't have as open of an ecosystem of what you can do in a web template as PowerShell will be. You can do anything in one of these that you do in a PowerShell script. You can output content of any type you'd like. One of the other tests here is outputting a random number generator, which is a silly test, sure, but not when you kind of consider that I am actually outputting a JavaScript module on the fly. Again, there is no index.js. I can also do it this way. And then I can just import that module and set some text. So this opens up a lot of interesting possibilities for web development on its own. But when you combine it with the, oh, and by the way, I have every post I've ever made, or I have a long-running data source of everything, or I have a SQL table that I'd like to visualize, it gets very overpowered very quick. Now, jumping back to our presentation for a little bit to kind of close that part of it up, it's almost the brave blue yonder. Hat Protocol is trying to build a better internet, and I believe we can help. This is a unique moment of opportunity to fix the World Wide Web with PowerShell and Ant Protocol. You have been learning today how to build a social site on top of PowerShell and Ant Protocol, and basically how to grab any sort of data you need and build any sort of site you want. So you have a lot of power. You can do a lot of things. You can take your passion and turn it into something great. And it would be great if we pick a problem in the World Wide Web and try to fix it. Never doubt that a small group, dedicated group of nerds can change the world. It indeed is the only thing that ever has. And questions, comments, and socials. Any questions? Speaker feedback is because this came from the PowerShell Summit and got modifications, but here you can follow me on Blue Sky, visit the site, mrpowershell.com, follow me on GitHub, either start automating our PowerShell web, join the user group, reach out on Discord, or email me. And that brings us to the end of our show. I'll leave the recording on for a little bit to see if we have questions from the room, and then we'll do some after party and head home.
That's really cool, James. Hey, I do have a follow-up because Josh did do the research for us all. He found out that as long as there's new commits within 60 days, the cron-based workflow will continue to run indefinitely.
Okay, so until the end of time or the end of GitHub.
Or until they change the terms of the agreement. Pray that they don't, I think is the proper phrase.
Fair. Anybody have questions?
Not a question, but I just wanted to say, like, I really appreciated, this was almost two separate presentations, I would say. Like, the first half was about the app protocol and showing, like, using it to grab all the Blue Sky posts and everything like that. So that was really cool. And the second part was just, like, essentially, like I said, how to build a static website with PowerShell, or like a technique that you can use. And I just wanted to call out, like, you mentioned then, like, you have a GitHub action that runs every 15 minutes or every hour, whatever it is, to update your site. And I would just say, like, if anyone else is thinking of using that technique of using, PowerShell essentially as your static site generator, like, you don't need to have a GitHub action that runs every 15 minutes. Like, you only did that because you want it to query Blue Sky every 15 minutes to grab your latest posts and show them on your website, right? But if you don't have, like, a real-time component like that to your website, you don't need to have the action run every 15 minutes. You can just have it only run when you check in new code and push it up to GitHub so that it regenerates the website. So I just wanted to make that clear to people.
Let me pause to make it more clear. There are two workflows you need. One is to synchronize the data. Okay, that's our Sync Mr. PowerShell one. and the other one is to deploy your GitHub page. This was made with very light modifications to what you'll get if you create a new GitHub page and you click the static site workflow. This is as simple as I, could make it with light modifications. Light modifications being, I'm going on every push, not just pushes to main, because it makes it easier to test. I'm going to run it on a schedule every 42 minutes. And you're right, that's why I'm going to run it on schedule, because I want to keep it synchronized with what I'm posting. And I want to have that capability. But the job for deployment is almost exactly the same. I decided to use fetch depth 0 recently so I could get more repository history. And I'm literally just go run this script and then go upload this directory and then go deploy. So it's a very short workflow. There's something else that I did want to cover though with respect to the go run the script. Talked about layout some. Well, let's just go back through our build and see what pops out. One thing is that by doing it this way, I can put it in any directory that I want. Another thing is that I have this open-ended PowerShell capability, which lets me handle different object types and output them differently, treat different extensions different ways if I want. So I can, again, do whatever I want to in my build. This would not be a bad default, but I'm not saying it's a good one yet. But yeah, it's very simple. You can also have a 404. That's easy enough. You literally just make a 404 HTML PS1. It works. We covered how layout works. I think we've covered, that's the thing I wanted to go through. Requirements. So one thing that I needed to do often enough and that I wanted to do to make things easy, and again, you can do things however you want, this is how I chose to do them, is auto-requiring modules. So if I have a file that I want to generate, let's go to another example here. Let's go to look at my page about my repos. Cool, I got some new stars. Definitely could make this page look better too, but that's part of the endless work in progress. If I wanted to get its source, I can go to html.ps1 here, or GitHub index html.ps1 actually. Yay for that. But I'm going to go ahead and look at it in here because it's easier. In this case, I wanted to use PS DevOps because I didn't want to write all the pagination logic all over again. And I wanted to make it easy, so I'm just requiring module PS DevOps. And if we look at how it's building every given file, or at least the PowerShell files, blah, 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 there it is. What are we doing? If it's a PowerShell file, we are getting the command and requiring any modules. Then setting the title automatically and running the file. And this means that all you need to do to use any module you want with this approach is just add a require statement. And your workflow will automatically pick it up. And if we go to our build log here for a second. Okay. So, build pages here. So it installed YAML to be able to get the YAML header out of the greetings file. Installed PSSVG for my logo file. It installed the OEmbed module for my YouTube page or my list of YouTube videos, which, we're going to go bring that up for a second. The OEmbed made it basically go call embed for each of the URLs and go give me an embedded version of this video. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. And what other ones did we end up using in this one?
It's all easy peasy lemon squeezy until that lemon juice squirts you in the eye, and then it's painful and awful.
Yeah, and I also am using uget for a test for the files by time. And I believe I'm using this just tests, not test. Yeah. I was using this to basically figure out how I'd build an RSS feed automatically. The sky's the limit. So,
I
yeah,
think the
you can
blue
have a
sky's the
simple
limit, isn't it?
workflow. Yes, the blue sky is the limit, Judd.
Blue sky's the limit, yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm trying to underline, you can have your workflow, you can have your build, do absolutely anything you want, and explore the possibilities. Because they are considerably greater than, well, Ruby or Hugo built in, which are not particularly great at running other commands. With this, you can run any command on box. You can run any module that exists. You could just require stuff and be on your merry way. And build it the way you want it. It's a very flexible way to build static sites. And quite frankly, build the content for dynamic sites too. So, yeah, I hope this helps everybody understand it. I'm going to go back to the socials slide one more time. And then we're going to say goodbye to the internet. Bye-bye,
Internet.
Twitch.
Bye, Internet.
Bye, Internet. See ya.